Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Straightforward topic, let's do it. What's the most dangerous situation you have ever been in? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I got drunk with a friend who lived in a bad part of town. The party got broken up by the cops. Everyone ran and I had to walk home. I remember hearing people whistling, not at me, but like they were signaling. Still very drunk, I remember the street being deserted, except for a couple of guys in hoods moving towards me. The bus pulls up, doors open just as the air brakes hiss. Where you going? I slur out my neighborhood. Me too, hop on, man. I fell asleep. The driver woke me up at my stop and I stumbled off the bus and managed to make it home. It wasn't until many years later that I thought about it. The bus driver saw me swaying down the street in a part of town I should not have been in. He must have been heading back to the garage or something, because no buses run that late. The guy stopped and picked me up. He drove me as close as he could to home and out of what was clearly going to be a very dangerous situation. My dad got angry with my mom one night, and instead of beating her like normal, he grabbed a zip-top bag from their closet with bullets in it. He came into the living room where my mom, brother, and I were sitting and waved the bullets in front of my mom's face and said, "I'm going to put one of these in your skull." He then turned to my brother and me and told us we'd be next. He went back to their bedroom to get his guns loaded. My mom grabbed us, took us down to the end of our street, and hid us behind a church. She snuck to a neighbor's back door and had them call the cops. We came back as the cops were handcuffing him with his guns loaded and ready for us. On a ferry during a storm at night in Thailand, when the crew is busy praying and crying in the corner, it's probably a good idea to keep one hand on the life preserver for the remainder of the trip. Someone tried to break into my house while I was in it, and I accidentally opened the door and found a stranger at my door, only to realize later on camera that he was trying to break in. He pretended to have seen me on some app. It turns out he was the uncle of a neighbor and had been watching me and knew I lived alone. Cops came and he disappeared. I was hiking in Washington State near a cliff. I tripped over a root and slid down a 45-degree angled bank, after which there was a 300-plus foot straight drop. I managed to stop myself about a foot from the edge by grabbing another root. My life flashed before my eyes. Early 90s. I was probably 5 or so since I wasn't in school yet. I lived at my grandmother's house with my dad and sister in the bottom story while he stayed upstairs. At this particular time, my grandmother was home with me when my dad was at work and my sister was at school. I found a pack of balloons somewhere and was blowing them up and pinching them so it sounded like a fart when the air came out. For whatever reason, I decided to inhale the air in the balloon this particular time. The whole balloon went right into my throat. Instantly, I could not breathe. I ran upstairs in a panic to the bathroom for some reason. My first step on the linoleum sent my feet sliding out from under me, and I landed straight on my back, which unlodged the balloon from my throat. Apparently, my grandmother had just gotten done mopping the kitchen and bathroom. Probably the time I was a little kid and went downstairs in the middle of the night to go pee, and I heard that the gas cooking stove was still left on. So I switched it off just because I was taught to switch off lights when I leave the room too, and I went back upstairs. But I got a bit worried that maybe I was not supposed to, so I went to wake up my parents to say I went to pee, turned off the gas in the kitchen, and then walked to my bed again. Apparently they went downstairs, avoided any light switches, and opened all the windows soon after. I was a private investigator several years ago. I mainly work in Texas. This is important, but this one case required me to fly out and interview people in Denver and Grand Junction, Colorado. I rented a tiny car, a Chevy Aveo, the cheapest thing available at the time. I interviewed a person in Denver, then drove out to Grand Junction. While I was in the hotel, I heard that there was going to be a blizzard, so there was a strong possibility that I could miss my flight the following morning. So I decided to just straight up leave Grand Junction at night and just send it. I had heard of blizzards before at Dairy Queen, but I had no idea what they were like. It was around midnight while I was heading up this mountain that I started to hit the blizzard, and holy shit, I've never seen that before. I had my heater on full blast. and it still wasn't enough to warm up the inside of the car. What's worse is that I was pressing the accelerator all the way down to the bottom, and the car was just barely moving up the hill. My cell phone didn't have any signal, and I just remember the car slowly losing power as I kept climbing up the mountain. I just ran out of road. It was just snow. The car was trying to push the snow out of the way. Eventually, the windshield wipers picked up so much ice that they stopped working as well. I was literally in the middle of it. I remember thinking to myself, oh, so this is what a blizzard is like. Got it. And then the sudden realization that this is how I die. I legitimately didn't have a plan at that point. I was in danger. I then hit a little segment of road that didn't have snow around Vail, Colorado. I'm guessing a snowplow was clearing the way in the area. Still no snow, no windshield wipers, but I was somewhat moving now. I made it out to an exit and pulled into a shopping area with a gas station, some fast food stuff, and some other place. I was able to get inside at least and get out of the cold. I literally had a computer bag, a shitty sweater that was thick enough for Texas cold, and a piece of shit Chevy Aveo. I learned a few things that night. Get home, it is a real thing, it's a stupid thing, and that nature is not a joke. Yeah, weather would probably be near the top of the list for me as well, as I'm trying to rack my brain for it. A blizzard popping up, even if it's expected, can be jarring to say the least, especially with those high winds. So yeah, glad you made it out okay, and thanks for sharing. It was the 90s and we went out in a nightclub. The driver was my friend's older sister. She was drunk when it was time to go home. We all said she should not drive and let someone else drive. Of course, she protested strongly and said she was fine. I stupidly believed it. It was scary. She would stop watching the road and turn her head to look at us in the back. We screamed at her each time. Look at the road, not stop swerving till I make it to close enough to my home. I stepped out of the car and walked a part of the way. I've never and will never ride with a drunk driver again. Now I have my car, and I simply don't get drunk. I don't enjoy being drunk. I was in Somalia as a soldier. Our platoon dismounted from our vehicles and set up an all-around defense at a small desert crossroads with a few small huts. My sergeant and I were told to scout out some brush at a small where we thought we saw someone walking outside the perimeter of our troops. We checked it out and ended up exchanging fire with a guy armed with an AK. Our troops thought we were bad guys, so they started shooting at us. I was laying there with branches and twigs falling all around from the machine gun fire, bullets whipping past my head, snap, 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 and I thought I was going to die. During this short period of time, the gunman, despite being severely wounded, managed to slip away. He dropped his rifle, ran right out of his flip-flops, and buggered off in bare feet. In any regards, nobody died that day, but it was close. I went out on my own in the hottest part of the day with a fainting condition. I saw a dog with a collar in the woods. I ran in after it, exhausted myself, and ended up passing out mid-run. I fell and slammed my head into a rock. We have a lot of wild pigs in our woods. A man and his son saw me and cried me out of the woods. My parents were completely horrified. Walking down the street with a coworker in Chinatown for San Francisco, the two of us happened to meet up with an armored car guard just as he was reaching his truck. A really sketchy homeless-looking dude has also arrived at this point, just about a step or so ahead of us, and for some unknown reason, takes a swing at the guard. They start tussling, and our momentum kind of carries me and the coworker right into the middle of this unfolding nightmare. The guard pulls his gun and is screaming, waving and swinging it everywhere. I saw the gaping maw of the barrel pass right across my face. I dove, pivoted, and scooted around the other side of the armored truck. My coworker also managed to disentangle himself and scuttle down to the front of the truck. All in all, this is not an experience I would recommend. I was slated to be on a helicopter flight in Iraq, but my pass was pulled at the last minute, and they gave it to some guy whose friend from HS, Boot, AIT, and the first unit died in his arms. The helo was hit by an RPG and everyone died. I was mad about the pass until my bosses informed me everyone had died. I was a bit elated to be alive and heartbroken for the deaths at the same time. I had my gallbladder removed and got a life-threatening complication, leaking bile duct, that almost killed me. I probably had a 50-50 shot of dying from sepsis. The recovery was horrible too. It took 16 more procedures and a whole year. I have permanent nerve damage in my stomach that took away all feelings of hunger, and no, it's not actually not cool at all. I also have a bunch of little scars and some pretty severe residual pain. A 2-lane highway, one-way 70-mile-per-hour highway carved into the side of a canyon. I was going 70 in the right lane. Some dude took the wrong turn somewhere up the road and was going 70 in the wrong direction, thankfully in the left lane. Idiot hopefully figured it out after we passed. If I'd been in the other lane for any reason, again, this was a one-way highway, and he or she were barreling at full speed the opposite way, there would have been no survival. And 2 cars going 70 miles per hour along these curving roads, we'd have basically had a reaction time. I didn't realize how messed up that moment was for another mile or two. I was in shock. So I got really shroomy before getting on a plane to Morocco, and I landed in Morocco feeling like a yes man. I got to the Medina in Fez, where my hotel was, and 2 guys offered me a joint and asked if I wanted help finding my hotel. I said yes, but they took me back to their house. There was a Swiss guy dusting fossils, an American on the bongos, and a Moroccan watching Nat Geo. We all had fun that night and got talking about weed. One of the guys who picked me up told me he had a weed farm, an entire valley of weed in the Atlas Mountains, and he could take me there tomorrow. When we got in the taxi the next day, he put a big cloak on me and said once we got past the police checkpoints, no one must see, and I must stay close. About 3 hours after the last checkpoint, we arrived at his family weed farm. It was a whole valley of weed in the middle of nowhere. It was a cool day. I ate this lamb and bread dish that his father made, and we exchanged details. But then the guy who took me didn't want me to leave and said we could do business. He showed me these pills and bags of weed. He wanted me to swallow both of them so my stomach would stop digesting and I could traffic the weed into Europe. That's what the Swiss guy dusting the fossils and the American guy on the bongos had been doing. I agreed to it and kept the charade going until we got back to Fez, but then I walked away and went to my hotel, finally. My son's father, at the end of an already vicious assault while high on drugs, held me at gunpoint, alternating between an assault rifle and a sawed-off shotgun. I had to just walk past a hole in the wall from a shotgun blast, so I knew they were loaded and he had used them. In the last incident, he stopped in the middle of beating me, got really calm, and told me he was going to kill me. He then grabbed a glass tray off the dresser, smashed it, and grabbed a big shard of glass. He then pinned me down and tried to stab me. I don't know how I kept his arm from reaching me. It was surreal going back and having him clean up my blood splatters from the walls. Not the first time, but fortunately the last.